The CoinDesk Spotlight is brought to you by Nexo, the place to earn on Bitcoin, Ethereum, and more.
Right, well, earlier I mentioned the weeks-long saga of the biggest DeFi hack in history, and that continues after hacking 600 million from Poly Network and returning most of it. The attacker is starting to return the remaining $235 million locked in a multi-sig account. This morning, 97 million has been moved back to Poly Network, and the network has tipped the hacker $500,000 as a bug bounty as a thank you. And joining us now to discuss is Joseph McGill, former U.S. Secret Service and postal investigator and now part of the TRM Global Investigations team at TRM Labs. Welcome, Joseph. So, Joseph, one of the first things I wonder is this a white hat hacker, a good guy who will return the funds, or is this someone who found a bug in the code, made off with 600 million, but then realized the money would be tracked and is now willing to return the funds?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks for having me on. I think that's been a debate in the community. Just to be clear, there's a few different differences in between a black hat hacker and a white hat hacker. A black hat hacker typically writes malware. They're experts in breaking into computers, and they do it for financial gain. Sometimes they do it for entertainment. A white hat hacker typically has a pre-coordinated contract with the company to where they may find exploits, infiltrate their systems, and then report that back. So in this case, it's very clear that this was not a white hat type hack. Mm-hmm. The situation started.
He seems to be enjoying it.
He is. It's been wild.
So how would you were saying, how would you evaluate this situation? Maybe you could walk us through it. How would you evaluate the security of Poly Network, how this exploit was executed and such, and perhaps you could walk us through what happened.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the last 9 or 10 days have been pretty crazy. Poly announced they had a 600 million hack. It hit across 3 different blockchains, and within a few hours, we saw various security companies indicating that they identified the potential flaw in the contract having to do with the type of bridge in the Ethereum network that connected multiple blockchains. And then we saw that a potential inflow from a exchange based in East Asia may have been identified to the attacker. Security company claimed that they had information associated with the attacker and had shared it with various companies. And from there, that's when the story, I think, really started taking a twist. And we saw the hacker all of a sudden started communicating via Etherscan and trying to change the game a little bit. It's been quite wild.
So they can actually identify this hacker. Is that the case?
Well, I don't think we know yet. Supposedly, they found some breadcrumbs at one of the exchanges based, I think, in China. And so, often cases we look at these and we find out the attackers use synthetic identity theft. Maybe they use a real social security number or ID and combined it with other fake information, or they could use stolen information as well. It's very unlikely the hacker's true KYC was probably at that exchange, but I'm hopeful that maybe that was a first mistake.
So what would motivate somebody to take, well, we know why they would take hundreds of millions of dollars, but what would motivate them to give some of it back?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think just because what we're seeing here is how great the digital asset community is. When something like this happens, it's very bizarre. Everyone comes together, they work well together. And right after the hack, you saw very many people from across the globe working together, trying to identify different breadcrumbs on the chain. And so I think the attacker saw that it was going to be very hard to move $600 million very quickly. And at that point, I think a decision was made to try to change the narrative of maybe this person's the good person in the room, and they're trying to find an exploit, and they're trying to help Poly Network out.
Hi, Joseph. I was wondering if you could give us a bit of a larger context here. So this is obviously a really bad look for crypto, because for people who are already wary of the industry, they just see these headlines about hacks and they're like, oh, crypto is so unsafe. I mean, how does this sort of crypto hacking problem, how does it fit into just the larger problem of traditional financial institutions? Like, I think people have the impression that crypto is worse or more dangerous, but how do you address that concern?
Well, I understand those concerns being former government. I used to be skeptic when I first started looking at crypto, but what I've learned about the blockchain and various crypto hacks is that the blockchain is very transparent. Investigations take a long time, but you have a better chance of tracking stolen or illicit funds on the blockchain than you do traditional financial or fiat crime. When you think of something like a business email compromise, which is billions of dollars a year in damages for individuals, that is traditional wire transfers. And people think that crypto is the worst phenomenon out there, but business email compromise right now is probably the biggest threat to the consumer across the globe.
I'm wondering, how would you evaluate the security of Poly network? Is it very weak, or are all DeFi platforms vulnerable? And I say this as a report from CipherTrace says that DeFi has accounted for over 75% of crypto hacks this year.
Yeah, I can't give an official comment on the technical aspects of the contract for the Poly network, but I think just in general, what we're seeing here is that DeFi protocols are great targets for hackers, and that's because the contracts are open source. Anyone can view the contracts, and so if you're an individual that's looking to exploit that, your biggest factor is time. How much time are you going to put into breaking the contract and trying to find that flaw? And when you look at other types of network intrusions and just traditional infrastructure, typically the code is not open source. You have to find an attack vector via either phishing to a website, or individual at a company clicks on the attachment, and that's how the individuals gain access to the network. But with DeFi protocols, it's open. And so I think what we need to see potentially is an increase in bug bounty programs and DeFi platforms that reward these true white hat hackers or gray hat hackers that want to have vulnerability disclosures. And I think that would help increase the overall security of the DeFi ecosystem.
Before we get to that point, though, is there anything else a DeFi platform can do prior to launch that would make it more secure, that would help them out?
I think it's very natural in this crypto space is to move fast and break things. And so I think sometimes it's great for these DeFi companies that are launching these great products, will continue to do so, just to take a tactical pause, pay the money, and have your contracts audited by a reputable security firm out there, and see what they can find before you go live. Finding these flaws in your contracts before you go live is going to be better than down the road. And also, I would encourage these DeFi protocols to enter reputable bounty-based programs that will pay individuals that find flaws in your contract.
Joseph, I'm wondering if you know anything of this latest hack out of Japan with their liquid global exchange.
Yeah, this is crazy. This is a crypto world, right? Just a week ago, a $600 million hack, and late last night, the exchange announced that their system, I think they called it their warm wallet, was compromised, and funds upwards around 80 or 90 million were moved between Bitcoin, XRP, Tron, and I believe a few other coins. And that's what I think TRM selling point is. We have some great coverage across multi-assets, and our customers can view that in one place.
I'm wondering, since there is this narrative that cryptocurrencies are untraceable, but they are traceable, right? So I wonder, with teams like yours, you're constantly tracking the movements of these cryptocurrencies, these digital assets, and so is it not as anonymous as it is made out to be?
Right. It depends on the protocol, but in general, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Bitcoin is a pseudo-anonymous blockchain, and companies like TRM are very good at identifying attribution of illicit actors and identifying the various flows. It's very transparent, and it offers great insight for regulators and law enforcement that are only looking for the small percentage of crime that is occurring on the blockchain. There are obviously privacy coins out there that are not trackable. But I'm not seeing a huge increase in illicit crime on these privacy coins, because the reality is that the privacy coins have a regulated liquidity problem, whereas BTC is a great off-ramp, and there's no liquidity problem there, obviously.